All right, today we're diving into something pretty incredible. A system developed over 1,000 years ago, designed to protect sacred knowledge from getting lost or corrupted over centuries. It's a fascinating story of what you might call intellectual engineering. So let's get right into it.
I mean, just think about the challenge for a second. There's no printing press, no cloud backups, nothing like that. All you have is human memory and manuscripts copied by hand, spread out across a civilization that's growing at an incredible speed. The question for those early Muslim scholars was huge. How do we make sure that the foundational texts, the Quran and the teachings of the Prophet, stay completely authentic for every single generation that comes after us? So here's our game plan for today. We're going to start with the challenge itself, then we'll get into the science of tafsir, which is all about understanding the meaning. From there, we'll look at the actual people who carried this knowledge and the chain of trust they built. And finally, we'll ask what this whole system could mean for us, right here, right now.
Okay, so the core problem here, it wasn't just about making sure you copied the words correctly. As the Islamic world expanded, bringing in all these different cultures and languages, the scholars quickly realized they were fighting a war on two fronts.
You see, it's one thing to make sure the Arabic words on the page are perfect replicas, but it's a whole other, much tougher challenge to make sure that the intended meaning behind those words doesn't get lost or twisted over hundreds of years. They needed a system that could protect both the words themselves and what they actually meant.
So the first part of their solution was to create a whole field of study dedicated to the text itself. This was the science of tafsir, or Quranic commentary. This was the deep, deep dive into the meaning of every single word.
And let me be clear, tafsir is so much more than just translation. It's this incredibly comprehensive analysis. Scholars would dig into the grammar of a single word, the historical context of when a verse was revealed, and how that verse connected to everything else in the scripture. It was all about building a complete 360-degree picture of the intended meaning.
And to see how this worked in practice, you'd have scholars analyzing the same verse from all these different angles. So you might get a commentator like al-Baydawi, and he would focus, for instance, on the precise linguistic meaning, the grammar, the rhetoric.
Then another scholar, someone like al-Nasafi, might come along and explore the same verse's theological implications. What does this tell us about the nature of God? What are the deeper creedal points here? And then you'd have a third, like al-Qurtubi, who might bring in historical accounts or legal rulings derived from that verse. It was this massive, scholarly conversation, like a peer review process that spans centuries, all designed to lock in the meaning and prevent it from drifting. This was their first line of defense. Okay, so you've got this rigorous science for understanding the text. That's great. But what about the people who are transmitting it? Especially when it comes to the sayings of the Prophet, the hadith. The scholars came to a critical conclusion. The reliability of the person was every bit as important as the text itself. And this led to the creation of something truly incredible, a field called Ilm al-Rijal, which literally means the science of men. This was a systematic, massive effort to create detailed biographical dictionaries for every single person who ever transmitted a piece of knowledge. It was all designed to answer one simple but crucial question. Can this person be trusted? And just look at the level of detail we're talking about here. This is an entry for a scholar from a famous book called The History of Baghdad. It doesn't just say he was a good guy. No, it records who his teachers were, who his students were, what other scholars said about his character, and even the precise year he died, 281 after Hijra. That is, 281 years after the Prophet's migration that marks the start of the Islamic calendar. This created this verifiable web of scholars that you could cross-reference.
And here's the kicker. All of this biographical data was used to grade each and every narrator. This system was called criticism and praise. So a narrator could be graded as thika, that's trustworthy and reliable, basically the gold standard. Or maybe saduq, which means truthful, but maybe their memory wasn't absolutely perfect. On the other end, they could be flagged as da'if, meaning weak, maybe they had a poor memory. Or worst of all, matruk, abandoned, usually because they were accused of lying. Only the reports coming from those top-tier, trustworthy narrators were considered solid.
So we've got a deep analysis of the text, and we've got a rigorous vetting of the people. The third pillar of this whole system is what links them together, the chain of transmission itself. This is the isnad. The best way to think about it is like a scholarly family tree, or maybe even an ancient kind of human blockchain. Every single saying of the Prophet, every hadith, had to come with its full chain of transmission, a complete list of every single person who heard it and passed it on, going all the way back to the original source.
And this is what that looks like in practice. A scholar would basically say, I heard this from my teacher, who told me he heard it from his teacher, who heard it from one of the Prophet's companions, who heard it directly from the Prophet Muhammad himself. Now, for any given hadith to be considered authentic, or sahih, that chain had to be completely unbroken, and every single person in that chain had to have been graded as reliable by that science of men we just talked about. Any broken link, any questionable narrator, and the whole thing was called into question.
So, when you put all of these pieces together, what you get is this truly remarkable system. It wasn't just one single technique. It was this interconnected, self-regulating web designed for one purpose: knowledge preservation. These three pillars all work together, right? You had the textual analysis protecting the meaning, you had the human verification that vetted the carriers of that meaning, and then you had the isnad, which provided a traceable, unbroken link straight back to the original source. Together, they created this incredibly powerful defense against both accidental mistakes and people deliberately trying to make things up.
And that really makes you think, doesn't it? In our age of digital misinformation, anonymous sources, and fake news that spreads like wildfire, what could we learn? What would our world look like if we demanded not just a piece of information, but also its isnad, the complete, unbroken, and trustworthy chain of how that information got to us? It's a powerful thought,